Judges Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and gatheringmagic.com. Support our show by visiting both websites. Now it's time for Judges Corner with David Green.
Welcome back to Judges Corner. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at a recently spoiled type of card in Dragon's Maze: split cards. Split cards were used as far back as Invasion Block and have been continued to be used throughout Magic's history to introduce two cards on one piece of paper. Split cards will be reviewed today in a capacity of their basic rules, how we use them, and then a whole bunch of abilities they interact with and effects they interact with, and how we use their information on them in order to play with them in a game of Magic. And then at the end of the episode, we'll take a brief look at the fuse mechanic, but we'll go into more detail about that towards the end. So to start things off, what exactly is a split card? Well, a split card is two cards sitting next to each other on a single Magic card, where we can cast one card with the other as if it were one single card from any other zone where we would cast it from. And when you have it in any other zone other than the stack, you use both characteristics in order to determine a lot of information found on the card. Let's take a look at those rules a little bit more in detail. So this episode is going to cover a lot of things like how split cards interact with different rules and effects and abilities, and how they work when they're being cast or when they're not being cast. So let's start things off simple by taking a look at how we cast a split card and how they are simply affecting things when they're not being cast. So casting a split card is pretty similar to casting a regular card. You announce that you're casting the split card, you put it down, and then you pick the side that you're casting. Then you go through the regular steps and it's officially cast. It's exactly like casting a regular card. In fact, it's as if you chopped off the side you're not using and it doesn't even exist. You're only using the converted mana cost of the side that you're casting, you're only using the characteristics of the side that you're casting, you're only using the effect of the side that you're casting. If it's a single color card, it's only a monocolor card on the stack. However, when split cards are not on the stack, they use both sets of characteristics to answer two questions at the same time. So what I mean by that is, if a split card is two colors, it's considered a multicolor spell, but both characteristics of the spell are both two different colors that are whatever colors they are. If you're looking for characteristics of the mana cost, it has two different answers. One mana cost for one side and another mana cost for another. And you have all the information that's listed on the card as two sets of characteristics when we're looking for characteristics of cards. So that should give you a firm understanding of how split cards work normally. So now let's go over a bunch of examples to help drive the point home and show you exactly how split cards interact with a bunch of abilities to help you have a firm understanding of how split cards work. So let's start the ball rolling with Spell Snare. Let's say that I play Determined off of Bound and Determined, and then my opponent wants to Spell Snare it. Can he? The answer is yes, because we only look at the side that we're casting when the spell is on the stack. The spell on the stack has a converted mana cost of 2, not a converted mana cost of 2 and 5. So it can be countered by Spell Snare. However, if we played Bound, we wouldn't be able to counter it because we're only looking at the characteristics given to us by Bound while the spell's on the stack, and its mana cost is not 2, it's 5. In a similar example, I have a Fire and Ice in my hand, and my opponent has a Goblin Piledriver, which has protection from blue on the battlefield. My question is, can I cast Fire to kill the Goblin Piledriver even though it has protection from blue, and the Fire and Ice is blue and red in my hand? And the answer is yes, because when I put Fire onto the stack, it's going to be a red spell, not a red and a blue spell. And we only use the characteristics of the red spell while it's on the stack. It's not red and blue while it's on the stack, so it can target and destroy the Goblin Piledriver. The next example would be Gaddock Teeg. Let's say that we have a Gaddock Teeg on the battlefield and we want to cast Research and Development, casting the research side for 2 mana. The question is, can we do that? And the answer is yes. That's because, like before, when we're casting a card from our hand, we only use the side that we're casting in order to determine the characteristics of the card. We don't use any characteristics on the other side whatsoever. However, if we wanted to cast Development, we couldn't do that because it costs 4 or more. In our next example, we have a Dark Confidant on the battlefield, and its effect triggers during the beginning of the upkeep. We reveal a Crime and Punishment, which has a converted mana cost of 2 and 5. So then the question is, how much life do we lose off the Dark Confidant? To answer this, we take a look at what the converted mana costs of the card are. The converted mana cost isn't 7, but when we answer questions that ask, what is the converted mana cost of a thing, we use both sides. So the answer is 2 and 5 together, for a total life loss of 7. So in our next example, we transmute a card looking for a split card in our library that has the same converted mana cost on one side as the transmute cost. But the other side doesn't match. Can we go get that card? The answer is yes. And that's because if we're looking for a cost that equals x less than x or more than x, we can use either side to make the statement true in order to go find the cards. In our next example, we have an isochron scepter and we want to imprint a card onto it that's an instant, costs 2 or less, but its other side also happens to cost more than 2. The question is, can we do that? And the answer is yes. That's because for the same reason above, as long as one of the two values is true, we can use the card to answer the question. Also, because we've imprinted it, it doesn't care any longer that the other side costs more, and we can cast the other side that costs more than 2. This next example is kind of neat. Let's say I play Bloodbraid Elf, and I cascade into a boom or bust. The question then is, can we even cascade into that, or do we have to keep on going? Well, we can cascade into it, since boom does cost less than Bloodbraid Elf. And if we cascade into it and we can, do we have to play boom, or can we play bust? The answer is, we can indeed play bust. That's because boom meets the requirements for cascade, costing less than Bloodbraid Elf, but when we go and cast it, we can actually cast the other side, which is bust, now that we've met the requirements to cascade into it. So we can actually kind of get a busted spell off of Bloodbraid Elf. In our next example, we have Appetite for Brains, and we want to discard a Beck and Call from our opponent's hand. Can we do that? Well, the converted mana cost for Call is 6, so it does meet the requirements for Appetite for Brains, so yes, we can discard it. The last rule I want to cover is when you have to name a split card. When you name a split card, you have to name both sides. But there's a cool rule that protects you, and that's if you can't remember the name of the card, as long as you can uniquely identify it, you're fine. Such as if you wanted to Slaughter Games a Wear and Tear, but you couldn't remember that the sides were named Wear and Tear, only Wear, you could describe it such as that one red and white split card that's in standard right now, that one side destroys an artifact, the other side destroys an enchantment, and one side is called Wear. That would be pretty adequate in uniquely identifying the card. So I know that was a lot of information to take in, but hopefully it answered a lot of questions you may have had about split cards that you didn't already know, and it'll hopefully be useful for answering other questions you may have in the future. Now, speaking of that, I know that we're going to have a lot more questions coming up due to Dragon's Maze re-releasing a bunch of split cards into the environment, but if we have any questions that we need to address, we will address them in a future episode. So, speaking of Dragon's Maze, let's take a look at the new mechanic, Fuse. Fuse is, you may cast one or both halves of this card from your hand. So before we go any further, I want to give fair warning that all the information that we have is only what Wizards of the Coast has released so far. We don't have the official FAQ or comprehensive rules on Fuse yet. But Wizards of the Coast has given enough information out right now that I feel fairly confident that we can review exactly what Fuse is and how it works on a basic level. So let's take a look at a couple Fuse cards now and see exactly how they work. The first thing you'll notice about split cards with Fuse is that they're just like regular split cards, except you can fuse them together because of the text written on them. When you fuse a split card together, you can only fuse it if it's played from your hand. If they're played from anywhere else, such as from your graveyard with a Snapcaster Mage, you can only play one half of the spell. When you fuse a split card together, it's considered one whole spell, and the effects are played out from the left half to the right half. When you play a split card fused together, such as Toil and Trouble, you can choose the same targets for both halves, or different targets for each half. If you fuse a card together like Wear and Tear, the card is considered multicolor while it's on the stack, because one half is red and one half is white. The converted mana cost of a split card you fuse together is considered the left half and the right half combined. And when you copy a card that's been fused together, the copy is also fused. By now, you should have a pretty good understanding of how split cards work, and a pretty good head start as to how Fuse is going to work in Dragon's Maze. Now, if you have any questions, since this is a returning mechanic with a twist on it for a lot of you and a brand new mechanic for the rest of you, make sure to send your questions to judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com or leave a comment below. And until next time, remember, if you fuse, you lose, or actually, if you fuse, you win, and have fun. So remember, if you fuse, you lose, or actually, if you fuse, you win, and have fun.
And cut.
Man, I suck at these puns. We need to get a better writer for this stuff.